Hello and welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to the next installment in my Learn Tarot with Me collection here on YouTube. And so today we are continuing our deep dive into the major arcana, and we are now looking at the Hierophant. So the Hierophant is the number 5 card, right? Last week we looked at the number 4 card, which was the Emperor. And we talked about how the Emperor was kind of the first time that we were meeting the Divine Masculine, right? And there are a few cards in the tarot, in the major arcana, that we could equate to the Divine Masculine, right? But I always feel as though the Emperor is kind of the first one for me. But we could also look at the Magician as being an embodiment of the Divine Masculine. And I guess we could also look at the Hierophant, right? But to me, the Hierophant, even though it's major arcana, so it's that universal energy, it's that bigger energy than everyday life, to me, the Hierophant is quite an earthly embodiment of divinity, right? So we can see that he kind of looks a bit like the Pope, right? And I think the Hierophant actually means high priest, okay? So in that way, he is the counterpart to the high priestess, yeah? So he's dressed in this regal red that we saw the Emperor also wearing, and he has a crown on his head and he's sitting on a throne, and he has I guess these are like devoted kind of followers, I guess, right? So it kind of denotes that he's preaching to people. And then we have these keys at the bottom, right? Which are kind of showing that he has the keys to unlock the divine wisdom of the heavens. That's how I read it anyway, right? So this is like he is the gateway to divinity in the way that the Pope may be seen as the gateway to divinity, or a bishop may be seen, right? So that's the energy that the Hierophant is holding, right? So when he comes up in a reading, he very rarely actually comes up as like the Pope, right? Or actually comes up as like a bishop. What he tends to represent is like a religious establishment as a whole, right? So back in the day, that would have been the church. And in some ways, I guess it still is the church now, but our relationship between church and state in the Western world has changed quite a bit. So the Hierophant kind of just tends to symbolize religious institution, but also institution, right? So this can be academic institution, this can be a work institution. It's basically anything that requires you to be traditional and to conform. So the Hierophant also relates to conformity, right? The other thing that the Hierophant is often seen as a card of is marriage, and that's because marriage in itself is an establishment, right? Marriage in itself is a move towards conformity, and marriage is a form of commitment. So when I see the Hierophant, I also very much think of commitment. I think of commitment in terms of relationships, or commitment in terms of a life path, okay? A life path that is probably quite traditional. Sometimes the Hierophant will come up literally in a reading to alert you to the fact that you may be going down a path that will feel quite traditional, quite conformity, and quite constricting because of that, okay? Because establishment, conformity, tradition, in the way that is experienced for us now in 2020, in the modern world, it also tends to carry a level of restriction with it, right? So the Hierophant can also be talking about that kind of restriction. So the Hierophant's an interesting card because it's a number 5. And the number 5s in tarot, the number 5s in numerology, talk about shifts and change, right? But the Hierophant is kind of somebody that doesn't change and doesn't shift. It's tradition, it's conformity. Those things don't tend to change. But as I mentioned before, the way in which we view things like the church, the way in which we view things like religious institution has changed. So the Hierophant also highlights the shifting ways in which tradition and conformity change, the shifting ways in which the establishment of marriage has changed, okay? So when the Hierophant comes up in the reading, it's big energy because it's calling us to move into something that's going to be solid, that's going to be committed, but that also has the ability to completely change our lives, okay? So I hope that makes sense for you, because I feel like the Hierophant is a very big energy that's actually quite hard to describe other than as the landmarks and the milestones of life is when the Hierophant shows up. The Hierophant almost shows up like a question, like a, will you commit to this? Will you commit to this change in your whole entire life? Okay? So, big energy of the Hierophant. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that helps you to understand this card a little bit more, because I think a lot of readers, people who've been reading for a long time, may find it tricky to understand the Hierophant. So I hope lending my interpretation has helped some of you out there. And next week we'll be looking at the number 6 card, which is all about the lovers. It's the lovers card, which has a lot of readings, not a lot of readings, a lot of meanings. So we'll be looking at that next week. But for now, I shall leave you with the Hierophant. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.